So Shay, I want to thank you for joining me today in this conversation about the potential future of special education. Before we begin, I just want to make sure that I have your consent that any material that we record today can be used for public use, that we can share some of this conversation, hopefully bring kind of an awareness and an understanding of what the potential future of public education may or may not look like.
Yes, you do have my consent.
Great, thank you. So I find it interesting that you're coming to me today, not only as an educator, but as a parent. So you have a doubly important voice because you're doubly affected, right? The future can affect you in your job and your workplace, but then it can also affect your family. So tell me a little bit about how you navigate those spaces, if you would.
Sure. I am a special education teacher, certified, and I do work in a school district in New Jersey. But I'm also a parent of a child. I have two children. My son has autism. He's been diagnosed since very young. I knew I saw the onset around when he had turned a year. In terms of he had a lot of the characteristics, not social, huge lack of eye contact, nonverbal. He was verbal and then all of a sudden just became nonverbal. A lot of behaviors, which were definitely related to the lack of ability to communicate. So I've been dealing, got him into early intervention, had an IFSP, which is the Individualized Family Service Plan, and then transitioned him into the district to receive services, and that's when he had his IEP at 3 years old. So I've been dealing with this a long time, and what's happening now with the talk and the actions that are now looking at, dismantling the Department of Education, it's very frightening, um, to say the least, of what's going to happen, especially to special services for our children with disabilities. I am extremely worried as a teacher because I don't know how that's going to affect my job. We're already at a deficit when it comes to special education with teachers. We're already at a deficit. Um, we, I don't know any district who's fully staffed when it comes to special ed teachers. I don't know a district that is fully staffed when it comes to specialists in terms of occupational therapy, speech therapy. What's the other one? PT, physical therapy, behaviorist. It is a problem. And that just leads into also a lot of IEPs are not fully being serviced because they just don't have the staffing. So now, if there's a threat to our funding, I'm extremely scared of how that's going to look for our children in New Jersey, where we have an extremely high rate of children with disabilities with IEPs. It actually, the numbers are continuously increasing. And I know New Jersey, one of my district, I'm working Prospect Park now. We're actually working with the NJIP, which is the New Jersey Inclusion Project, where we're now trying to rework our district in a way where we're now becoming a more inclusive district, which is not just my district. There are a bunch of districts that are actually a part of this project. And it's a positive move, but the problem is again, this is also coming from funding. So when all that goes away, it's very scary. I don't know if that means a reduction in services. If you have a child that's getting speech 3 times a week, now with funding, is it going to say now we can only give them 1 time a week, or now are they going to say it's going to be up to the parent to go through their health care to get their child services, and the schools are no longer going to have to provide it. I don't know what that looks like. It's really scary. I was a resource teacher where I provided pull-out replacement services. And those were for children who, were in a gen ed class, but their content areas of language, arts, and math, whatever is prescribed on the IEP, they would get pulled out of their setting to get a more small group, sort of like a tier 2 setting, where it's smaller group, more and intimate. an intensive learning where they're able to learn in that smaller setting. And they're actually more successful, and then they go back and they're able to have their science, their social studies, their gym, their music, whatever it is, with their peers in their grade level. That might get cut, which is very scary. And to have children who definitely demonstrate a need for a smaller setting in order for them to be successful, and to have individualized learning plan for them, and to take that away and just say they're just going to be in a general population where we know as educators all children do not learn alike. They just don't. um it's we don't want it to become just like a standardized type of setting where we just giving everybody the same formula. That's what I'm scared is going to happen, and we're going to see a larger deficit in our learning with our children. We're going to see a lot of them fall behind, especially in our urban districts, which is really what's scaring me. Um, and the unknown is what's really frightening, because right now it's we get our information from the news, things kind of trickle down. This administration is not being completely transparent. Um, and we're kind of just sitting here waiting. It's the most uncomfortable feeling as a sped teacher, as a parent. I can say my child right now, he is, and I'm sorry, cut me off if I'm talking too much, Melissa. He is, I'm sorry, Caden is autistic. He's in an autistic setting. His his ratio is 1-1, I want to say 1-1-6, where he has one teacher, one aide, 6 children. He's been so successful in this setting. He also receives OT services, occupational therapy. He also receives speech services. If there are cuts to funding as a parent, that scares me what that looks like. Um, the fact that he's getting it in that setting is very important. Now, can I get that through my personal health care? I absolutely can. Um, if I have to pay a copay or even, get private service for him, can I do that? Absolutely. Can every parent do that? No. That's what scares me. Is every parent as informed as I am? No. Is there anyone who's saying to parents, you need to start listening, you need to know your child's IEP, you need to know your rights, you need to know who your representatives are that you need to call in Trenton if these funds do get cut? Do they know? No. That's what's scaring me as a parent, as a person. Um, and it's been weighing very heavy on me on what can I do. I speak up loudly at my board of ed meetings. I just actually spoke at the last 2 board of ed meetings to stop a change they were trying to make with with certain classrooms in our Patterson Public Schools district. And it's so funny, when I came up and spoke about it, the commissioners had no idea that that's what they were going to vote on. It was in their agenda. They were changing some classrooms. They were trying to change my son's classroom is an autistic setting. They were trying to change it from an autistic setting to an MD/autism setting. MD's multiple disabilities, which made no sense. Multiple disabilities, autism does not fall under multiple disabilities. So when I went, I had to explain to them why it does not fall under multiple disabilities. It's totally different setting. And that would put my son and his peers at risk of being in a classroom with children who don't understand autism. It would look like it in terms of the layout, in terms of the instruction, that would take so much work and more staffing, which was not going to happen. But what scares me is that's what we're looking at happening if we don't start to educate our community even more and say, you've got to speak up, you've got to know what's going on with your children. Otherwise, there are things that are going to pass right before our eyes, and we're not going to have any choice in the matter. We're not.
Yeah, that's definitely scary. As you were talking, I was imagining, we're kind of creating even a greater divide in our society, right? We know we have a divide because of economic opportunity. We know we have a divide because of housing opportunity and lack of. And so to make an educational opportunity and to widen that gap that we as educators have been trying to shrink for years and, since the beginning of time of public education, it's definitely a frightening fact. So you said that your son first started, he lost his communication abilities around 1 year old, and then you got him services when he was 3 years old. So there was a 2 year gap there that I noticed.
No, he had early intervention. I would
Okay,
say
he did
he had
have early.
IFSP. I probably didn't say early intervention. The IFSP, which is the Individualized Family Service Plan. As soon as I saw the loss of the speech and I saw the switch up in behaviors, I immediately called the state. They came and evaluated him. So he actually, and they got it. I got on it so quick, and I went and got him I went to a developmental pediatrician at in Hackensack, because Patterson, the wait list was 6 months. I was not waiting for 6 months. So I ran over to Hackensack. They did the write-up, and he immediately got services. It was the best thing I did. The best thing I did. When you talk about IDEA, it's scary because that falls under early intervention. I'm actually, I do EI. That's my part-time job outside of teaching. I also do EI. These children need EI because once you hit the district, and of course it depends on what district, and I'm not going to say all districts are the same, but that personalized one-on-one, I'm going to homes, I go to the daycare. It's literally that one-on-one um, uh, instruction, and it could be just as simple as being able to pass an item to me, following directions, recognizing their name. And then I loved going in the daycare settings because we also work on socialization skills. Those are opportunities that those children need. Those are all being funded by the state right now. If those funds are cut, you are now going to have children who are under 3 with parents who are not going to know what to do. And a lot of, and I'm sure there's statistics on this that you could even run, Melissa. A lot of the parents who are receiving, the majority of parents that receive early intervention services through the state pays for it because their income is so low, they don't even have to pay a copay. If we change this funding, what does that look like?
That's a good question. And, as you're talking about early intervention services, I was reminded of, what's going on with the DOE website. I don't know if you checked it out lately, but all of the research on early childhood has disappeared. That was what most of the recent research was on the website. So, part of this concern as well is the attack on the early childhood programs, the early intervention services, because let's face it, they are expensive, but at the same time, in my mind, that's the best investment in a community, right? You want to be able to grow children from child through to adulthood, and you need that early start to find out what kind of services they may or may not need, provide them access to the services, the resources, and then once they're in the community and they're, full adults and they're participating in society, that's economic growth, right? And I hate to boil human beings down to economic growth, but we're talking dollars here, so we do have to kind of translate that a little bit.
Yes,
So
yes.
you were lucky that you were able to get those services for your child. Friend,
I And you just reminded me, just real quick. My daughter, I have my daughter's older. She's is a 3 year gap difference between my son and my daughter. My daughter, she was having speech issues when she was young. I got her early intervention. The early intervention worked so well, and she worked with a speech therapist and a DI, which is what I am, a developmental interventionist, which is basically a special ed teacher. By 3, Callie did not need an IEP. Because normally the process is you get early intervention, you have your IFSP, and then the district will now do their assessment and see, does this child still need IEP services? Where our IEP services in Jersey are through the roof. It's just too many. That's the plus. The fact that Callie did not need it because I got her the early intervention. Had I not gotten my daughter early intervention, I am 100% sure Callie would have had to go into the district getting an IEP. I guarantee it. So when you talk about that trickle down effect, if they cut those early childhood services, what is that going to look like for our districts that are already at a deficit when it comes to providing those services? What does that look like? Then we're just going to what? Continuously have lawsuits against who? Trenton? And Trenton's going to say we just don't have the money.
Right.
So I don't know if this is all being considered, Melissa. I
No,
don't.
it's definitely, I think the ripple effect is larger than what people imagine. So you're early intervention,
Mhm.
but uh, were you in the classroom before you did early intervention? You said you were a resource room teacher.
Yeah, so I was when it's funny, I got my special ed degree, and when when I was getting my sped degree, I was teaching in New York. I was a day have facility director for adults with disabilities at the time. And then when I decided to go back and get my master's for my sped degree, um, that's when I started teaching at the same organization in New York. So when I made the transition to Jersey, because it was just too much with the commute, and I was like, I'm just going to start, I'm just going to transfer to Jersey. I transferred my certification and everything. And that was when I first got introduced to the EI, because at that time, that's when I had my daughter. And I was just like, oh. And when I saw what they were doing, I was like, I could do that. So I was like, I'll do this in addition to being a teacher. So I've never stopped the teaching. It was such a great opportunity because I remember when I first interviewed for it, I told them I'm a parent and I went through it. I get it. I get it. And I think that was the biggest piece of being able to relate to these parents and empower them. Because while after I do my sessions, I'll always sit with them, especially when I know my students are getting close to 3. I tell them, I need you to call ahead. I need you to let them know, my child's getting 3. You need to start making this the appointments because even though they have case managers, they don't know that personal side. I tell them they have 45 days to get back to you. I give them all that. Make sure that they stick to that time. They stick to your timeline. Because it's so funny when I was making the transition for my son, and I contacted Patterson Public Schools for the testing. I think I think it was like they had 1 day left before I could do a file for before I would have to file due process with Trenton. And I called them and I gave them a courtesy. I said, you guys have 1 day left, and they made sure his testing was done the next day on that last day. But it's stuff like that that parents are not aware, where they kind of just keep getting put off, and it gives me the opportunity to empower them and make them even stronger advocates. So that's been like in addition to providing the instruction for their children and seeing their children blossom and grow, which is amazing. It's also an opportunity to to make those families even more empowered and know their rights. Tell them about the prize book. You need to know what that book is. It's available online. You don't have to get a hard copy. I send them the link. You need to know who this is, and this is what it's going to look like as that process, and keep on top of this for your child, because once it's the district, it's no longer just the state. It's a different game that you're playing. So yeah, I love it. I do love it. Yeah.
Your passion definitely shines through.
Yeah.
I will say that.
Mhm.
So how about a student who hasn't been able to get services, or you haven't like quite been able to get through to the parent as to, what their rights are, and, it just there's a delay. What does that look like? What have you seen?
That definitely has happened, where you can see on the IEP clearly that there are things that are supposed to be happening that are not happening. We've had that. I've had it, and I can say it now because I left the district, where I did reach out to a parent, and it's so funny. We just had this conversation at one of our county meetings last year. Um, is it okay to reach out to a parent and say, I see your child has these services and they're not getting them? There's a lot of fear where educators feel like they shouldn't, because they feel like the district is going to say, why did you say anything? I have done that before. Now, I've had it from both sides where a parent has reacted, and I say, this is who you need to call. You need to say, I see this on IEP, but, I'm hearing that there's no speech therapist in the building or in the district that's serving this building. What's happening? and they will follow through. Then you have the other parents who, and I don't want to say they're not concerned, but they're working ridiculously long hours. And these, of course, are, I hate to say it, low income housing, low income households where their only concern is getting that check so they can get some food on the table for their child, they can keep the heat on, they can keep a roof over their heads. And they're just happy that their child is in school. And if they're with a sped teacher, that's enough for them. That does worry me. Um, I'm I make it a point to be close with my child study team members. So that helps, to say what's going on. And you hope that you're in a district where you have colleagues in child study team. You don't have to be the best of friends, but where you have a relationship and where they're just as passionate to say, we've got to make this happen. We've got to get this done. You may not always have the administration you can go to, but you should have an admin that is aware of what's going on. What it looks like, I'm not sure. See, I think it does depend on the person. I'm very headstrong. And I've had people say, oh, well, Shay, you're non-tenured. You gotta, especially when I was non-tenured. You're non-tenured, you gotta watch what you say. And I'm like, okay, but I can get a job somewhere else. I'm gonna be honest. I think right now, in terms of teaching, it's a teacher's market. If you want to switch districts, you can switch districts. And I hate to say it like that, but if I'm going to get removed because I'm speaking about the law, the IEP is a legal document. And if it's not being followed, that makes it illegal. Very simple. Legal versus illegal. It's very simple. And also it's at the point that do we want to, and I think this is a key question that everyone should ask. Do we want to see this child have an IEP for the rest of their life? No, for their entire educational lifeline that they're in a school. If the services are not being rendered, then you're putting that child at a disadvantage. We want to hopefully, be able to phase them out. That would be wonderful. I remember when Caden first had his IEP, when he came in the district, Caden had a lot of behaviors. He was hitting, he was biting, throwing himself on the floor. It was painful. I was getting constant calls. But because we put a behavior plan in place, he had a behaviorist that was on his IEP, totally phased out. I remember we kept having meetings, and I think it was when he was about in second grade. They're like, Miss Brown, you still have the behavior plan on here. Do you still need it? And it was out of the fear of me, but I was like, no. And they were like, we haven't had any incidents, but it's because the services were rendered. It worked. So I was able to phase that out and take it off the IP. And now that behaviorist can go to another student who needs it more than my son. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's all relative. It's all connected. But what does that look like? I don't know. I think there's fear among educators of saying anything to parents and families, and I think that's a problem. I think districts need to say it's okay, but I don't think you're going to get a district that says that. I don't think you're going to get administration that says that, because they're already pulled tight at the strings where, they just don't have enough staffing. And it is a lot. I can't imagine what superintendents and people at the top do. I can't imagine. But you do have that role and it's your responsibility. So you got to try to make it happen the best way possible.
Yeah, so, as I'm thinking about this, it's a lot of power struggles because monetary resources are limited. So, I keep thinking, all right, funds are cut at the federal level. That means more responsibility falls onto the state, which means ultimately more responsibility falls onto the taxpayer because our state is taxpayer. Our schools are funded with local municipal taxes. So I have to, and I keep questioning people that don't see that connection when they talk about, oh, my taxes are too high. I keep paying for schools, but then when these students, let's say students that don't receive services and don't know how to handle themselves out in society once they become an adult, but they still have to feed themselves, right? They still have to survive. And typically that tends to be people that turn towards things like crime and drug use and other illegal activities,
Yes.
that those same people that vote against, funding our schools and providing these services don't want in their communities either. So I have such a hard time when people don't understand that connection.
They don't. They don't. I don't know if a flow chart would help them. To sort of say, if you make this decision, this is what's going to happen. If you make this decision, I maybe making it visual. I don't know, because if when you're talking to them, I don't think they get it until it actively happens, and that's the problem. And it's I think we're seeing that now, Melissa, where, a lot of promises were made prior to the presidential election, and it was all verbal, fine. But now, even though certain things were already said that were very clear of what was being cut, in terms of deportation, everything was very clear. Let's be clear about that. But not until after post-election, when now you're actively seeing it. Oh, that's what he meant. But he said that. He said that. His administration said that. So what's scary is exactly what you're saying. Not until they're actively in it, until they're receiving, on the receiving end of the product, the reaction, the response to, them not advocating, or them saying, why do I need to, we don't need this. Yeah, cut those services. This is going to be your trickle down effect.
It is, and I guess my biggest concern overall is the generation that we're going to lose in that process,
Yeah.
because this is, years of an education. Child's in school for what, 12 to 15 years,
Yes.
if
Yes.
not more. So it's going to take a long time. And, my kids are older. I have two adult boys. So they're,
Mhm.
when they have children, what's it going to look like for them?
Yes. And
Yes.
it's so interesting when you were talking earlier, like, about services and vouchers. My Title IV funding, my son's school is now, it's an amazing program. They're doing this after school program. Perfect example. And this after school program is 3 days a week, and it's going to work on life skills. Now, do I work on life skills at home with my son? Absolutely. But my background's in is in education, working with children with disabilities, adults with disabilities. So I have that advantage, so to speak. But this service is being provided to a lot of his peers who don't have the same opportunities my son has, if that makes sense to you. And this is 3 days a week. That means this is going to fund for the staff to stay after school. It's from 3 to 6. They're going to be able to pay the staff to work with these kids. These kids are going to go shopping, learning how to make a grocery list, make very simple recipes, even if it's peanut butter and jelly. What do you need? We need to go to the store and get some bread. We got to get some peanut butter. We got to get some jelly. Going to the laundromat. Why do we go to the laundromat? We need to clean. Okay, so we're going to take your jacket. We're going to go there. What do we need? Oh, we need some money. How much money? Oh, you might. And now the laundromats have cards. All of these are going to be covered 3 days a week. So that's 3 to 6. That's 3 hours times three. That's 9 hours a week. That funding is going to pay for that. You cut that funding, you have a lot of households where these kids who are, because of their special abilities, because of their learning style, they are not going to be like every typical adult. They're going to need more support. You're taking that away in the time that they're supposed to be learning that within their educational setting. What does that now look like? And let's say I'm a parent who's in I'm working all the time. I don't have time to concentrate on those skills for my child. I am hoping that my child's educational setting can provide that for him or her. You're taking that away from them now. So now what is my child going to do? It's just, they're not seeing the effect. They're not. And what's even scarier is there's no one even remotely close to them that they're willing to listen to say, wow, I didn't know that. I feel like we're in a dictatorship. I do feel like, I'm trying to be politically correct here. I just, I'm watching my words. It's just, it's do as I do and do as I do. That's it. So it's just very, very scary. And when I look at this program that they're implementing, which is absolutely wonderful, and I'm saying, okay, my son's going to benefit now, but what's going to happen next school year? I don't know what's going to happen over the summer, how things are going to transition. Um, it's scary. I keep using scary, Melissa, but I don't know another word. I
Yeah,
don't know another word.
yeah,
Very,
definitely.
yeah.
So in terms of trying to stop this and push back, um, I'm hoping there are people that will listen to us, right? And we share these stories. I don't know. Do you have any other ideas?
I'm continuing to be vocal. I'm in Patterson. What's great is when I do show up at the BOE meetings, they're live streamed, and I've had people reach out to me like, oh shit, I didn't even know that, which is great. I've met people at these Board of Ed meetings that I've never known. So continuing to have my voice. Um, and I'm very clear when I go that I'm not just speaking for my son. Yeah, I'm speaking for Caden, but I'm speaking on behalf of the other kids because there's a lot of parents who are not aware. And I need to speak up for those kids too. It's not okay, for you to think, oh, okay, well, and this is the mentality, and that happens in a lot of districts. Okay, so Caden's mother speak up, so we're not going to touch Caden's class. That's what I don't want to see happen, because I've seen that happen. Don't just, think, oh, because I know if I do that with Caden's class, Caden's mom is going to come up. No, no, no. What about the other classes? No, we're not going to do that. So that's my biggest piece now. I am trying to figure out, and I've had people say that like it's hard because I am a working mom. I'm trying to raise my two kids. My daughter's in high school. God bless me, help me. So it's just like, I'm dealing with that. I'm a single mom, so it's me doing it. Even though, and gotta give credit, their father's he's amazing, he's in their life, but when it comes to advocacy, that's my strength. Like that's me. But also trying to hold down, a household, but have time for this. I am very passionate about it. I want to make more time for it. Um, right now and I'm hoping I can say this piece, Melissa, this governor race is going to be key, because if they're giving money to the states, we have to be very clear on who we need to make governor. Because if we're talking about our education, everybody's not down, and I'm spiller all day. So I need us to be very clear about that, spreading the word, what that looks like, and because there are a lot of people who just don't know how it's going to hit. I know some states that I'm very scared for them if it goes to, Florida. So I can't even imagine what that's going to look like. I cannot even imagine, and stuff was already put into play. So we've got to really this next race for governor is so important. We've got to be very vocal. I think that's a big first step right now, when it comes to our education and what our schools are going to look like. I think the other piece is, because the language barrier is a big thing, especially I could speak about that with Patterson. That's been my biggest fear too, because we have a lot of parents who don't speak the language. And yes, you can go to your meetings, but do they really understand what their rights are? I don't think there's enough sharing of getting people really informed. And I've been trying to figure out how can I do that. Um, that is something that's like a personal charge of mine. I got to figure out how to get to more of these families. I know that there was when I was young, when not younger, when Caden was young, one of the things at his school, he went to a school in Pattersondale Ave, and there was a special ed teacher who actually she had a parents network where she met with the parents separately, and it was just simply to say, this is how you read the IEP. This is what your rights are. Let's go to, look at the prize book. Let's look at page 7. and this is a due process form, and this is, you fill this out with. And it's interesting because when they had cut, just to give you background, when they cut Cadence services for speech, and they didn't let me know, and when I was asking, I'm emailing, I'm calling, nobody's getting back to me. I found out about that due process from those meetings that she was holding.
Hmm.
That was how I found out, and that's how I filed it. And I went to Education Law Center. I got a lawyer, and we fought it. We won. Caden got compensatory services in addition to putting back his service back on. But that was me. You know how many parents didn't even know about that?
Yeah.
And those IEPs are now gone. Those children did not get any speech because there was no speech for that district, for the district, for those certain buildings for the rest of the year, Melissa.
Wow.
It was
Wow.
insanity. And to this day, I can say that, what's today? February 15, 2025. I still never received in writing that the services were disrupted.
Hmm. So for our NJEA members, out there, I do want them to know that the PEP education grants have been opened back up for portals for humanitarian crisis from now until
Okay.
towards the end of March, it'll close again. And I do know a lot of conversations around know your rights for immigration sessions are happening in different locals, but I now see this as another potential area where we can use some of those funds to have some know your rights sessions for special education parents and
Okay.
our early childhood, right? They have a lot of rights and a lot of them have not been identified as being in need for services, especially if they're just coming into the school district. So I think that's definitely where we could use some of those grant services.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because in order to get identified for the early childhood, they usually go through agencies. Those agencies get state funding too, through the education department. Those would get cut.
Yeah.
Like it's just when you talk about education and how many areas, there's just so many variables that have to be considered. It's too many to just be checking off boxes. It's way too many. It's personal, and they've got to realize that this is not just something generalized you could just cut and say, okay, we're going to save money in that department. You can't. The residual effects would greatly impact our societies, greatly impact. And we can't do this for 4 years.
Nope.
Yeah,
Nope.
can't do this for 4 years.
And then pick up the pieces after.
Oh yeah, and that how can you imagine what recovery looks like?
No.
Even wanna like I can't even begin to see, and that would be such a mess to clean up. Melissa,
Yeah.
just can't do it. So we've got to be more vocal. We've got to fight. Um, Becky, Madam Pringle, Madam President, she's just been so on top of it, which has been so appreciative. And I know, Steve, Petal, Sean. Sean is already all over it, but it's just I think they have such a large platform, which is beautiful, but we're here in the streets, in our communities, on the block. We've got to start really talking to our neighbors, to our parents. We got to get that stigma out. Don't be fearful of saying, have that conversation. Have that conversation, to all my SPED members. Have those conversations. Please have those conversations with the parents. And you're not violating anything just by having a conversation. Let them know. Do you know your kids? Have you really looked at the IP? And there's nothing against the law or any district, policy. I don't believe, not in mine, but anywhere else where it says you can't sit down with a parent and explain their IEP and what their rights are. That is not illegal. No district or admin can say, oh, we're going to retaliate for you. No. If they're not sure, it's not sure. Especially if you know the language and you can really communicate with that parent, please take that time out and do that. Take that time out. It's vital right now. It's vital for our babies. It really is. Even if they're 14, 15, they're our babies. We've got to get stronger with this. We have to. Yeah.
I agree. Well, Shay, thank you. I'm gonna stop this right now.